Well, this is exactly the kind of fun and happy video that I really wanted to make. That was sarcasm, by the way. Welcome to the channel. Amos Yee, the libertarian, so libertarian that he believes, or at least believed, perhaps he's changed his mind, but considering the topic, I doubt it, that suing a company that has literally tried to destroy someone's livelihood is the disgusting act, not the fact that someone tried to take away their income through shady means in the first place. Video linked in the description. Now, I want to preface this video by saying that I have no problems with and share no small number of opinions and principles with non-insane libertarians, but as with all groups there are extremists, and that's where Amos Yee comes in. Come on Amos, what do you want to talk about today?
Let's have a nice civil discussion on pedophilia.
Yay!
I've made videos and tweets about this topic before, but I don't think that the points I made previously will be as clear as the ones that I will make in this video. And also at that time, I went around calling everyone a fascist for those who disagree with me. Yeah, I don't think I should have done that. It seems pretty dickish.
Well, you seem to have at least matured somewhat in your argumentation since we last spoke, so I'll probably be a tad nicer than I was last time. But be warned, when you say something stupid, and you will, I'm going to pull it apart.
So if people want to most accurately represent my position on this issue, cite this video. Take this video as a far better draft 2.
Fair enough, this is, by your own words, your exact positions on this topic, so if you think people aren't understanding your positions this time, that's going to be on you, buddy.
Let's begin.
Do we have to? I really don't want to talk about this. Can't I just pwn some artards? No, this is important, isn't it?
First, we need to agree on just one thing, that sexual abuse is not determined by age, but instead on whether or not the relationship involves consent.
I can agree with that, although it's probably going to undermine your entire thesis. In this case, children cannot consent, Amos. There are reasons that we don't just let kids out into the world Pokemon style at age 10. They have yet to form the cognitive faculties to make good decisions and are very, very easy to manipulate. There's a reason they call it grooming.
Most people would make the absolute broad generalization that any kid that is below the age of 12 are not able to consent to sex.
And they would be absolutely correct, but I think any kid below the age of 16 isn't really either. For those who don't know, 16 is the age of consent in the UK, so I'm going off of that. I mean, it becomes a blurred line as they reach the legal age, but that's why we have those laws. You don't have to figure out whether or not you should fuck that kid. Just don't. It's a crime.
But then one day, a 42-year-old adult comes along and says that while he was 10 years old, he had a perfectly consensual sexual relationship with a 30-year-old adult.
And he would be demonstrably wrong. Psychology is a deep and complicated topic, but it is very well known, well documented fact that children are negatively affected by sexual acts at a young age. And even if, in this one case, miraculously, this person developed in the exact same way with no deep trauma that wouldn't even necessarily be aware of at a conscious level, it wouldn't change the fact that the vast majority of kids are. And that, how about we just don't fuck any kids, just because there's a minuscule chance it won't screw them up for life?
10-year-old him was not traumatized afterwards, the relationship was perfectly fine and consensual, and both of them enjoyed the sexual relationship.
Little known fact, victims never ever defend the perpetrator and or minimize the effect of their abuse to protect their psyche. I feel like I'm going to need to always point out when I'm being facetious in this video due to the nature of the topic, but I'll be damned if I'm going to stop being a sarcastic piece of crap for even a minute. So yes, that was sarcasm, let's move on.
So do you think that that kind of relationship should not happen? That just because the child was below 18, that relationship that was perfectly harmless should be considered child rape?
Well, for starters, you said a 10-year-old. It seems to me that you would only say just because they are below 18 her dare to be disingenuous. Because let's be clear, a 30-year-old having sex with a 17-year-old and a 30-year-old having sex with a 10-year-old aren't even in the same leagues. Hell, that's not even the same sport, mate. But No, a 10-year-old cannot consent because of the reasons previously discussed, regardless of how they manage to justify what has happened to them, or how much they think they don't care. Kids cannot consent. Next, you'll be wanting to have them take out loans and breaking their thumbs when they don't pay them back.
No! That's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I'm gonna have to use that a little later, much like I did with this last time.
The retardation is impeccable.
Still great.
Nobody was harmed.
D-fucking-baitable.
And this is not a fantasy story that I just pulled out of my ass. There are numerous stories of children below the age of 12 who have had mutually beneficial relationships, sexual relationships, with adults.
There are numerous stories of people having cancer and surviving into their old age. Let's all go play in radioactive waste, shall we? Seems like it'd be fun. Might give you superpowers.
No! That's absolutely ridiculous.
But I want my superpowers.
The retardation is impeccable. So if you agree that that kind of relationship should be completely fine and legal...
I don't, and anyone who knows anything about, well, not even child psychology, like Amos. Have you ever met a child? They are, and this is coming from a parent, fucking stupid. I mean, they are capable of amazing things, but I wouldn't trust one to do my taxes, or even leave them alone in a house for a few hours. They make bad choices as they explore the world with no real idea what the consequences of their actions are, unless we've already taught them. And even then, trying to explain the long-term consequences of sexual activity is not the same as tidy your bedroom or no big boy sticker today.
Then you should also agree that every relationship between a child and an adult is alright as long as it involves consent.
I don't think you understand what consent means. Consent cannot be given by someone who doesn't understand what's going on. Consent could not, for instance, be given by someone who is severely mentally handicapped. Because even if they're happy to do something, want to do it, and they think it's a great idea, you could be taking their life savings in exchange for a cute teddy bear that they like. And they simply don't understand the values of those things in relation to each other. Amos, show me a child who consents to have sex with a 30-year-old, and I'll show you a child who has no idea what that means.
Let's continue. Now, I am absolutely certain that we should not discriminate against pedophiles. Our society's treatment of pedophiles is inhumane and horrendous. Oh my gosh. A pedophile is simply defined as an individual who has a sexual attraction to children. That's it. It doesn't mean he's going to molest children. It doesn't even mean he's going to act upon his sexual urges. All he has is the non-violent sexual attraction to children.
Right, I had to let that one play on a bit because, Amos, my boy, your very first argument is that adults and children should be able to have sex. So we aren't really talking about non-offending paedophiles here, are we? Not in your world. However, to talk about this exact point in a bubble for a moment. While I think that treatment is generally a perfectly reasonable way to deal with non-offending paedophiles, I also don't want them teaching children or running orphanages. We don't give felons the keys to the vault, and we shouldn't put paedophiles in situations where it is far too easy to give in to temptation. Simply put, it would be irresponsible for us not to take that sexual proclivity into account if it's a known factor when making certain decisions about those individuals. Should we have the burn 'em all mentality? No. And honestly, I worry about people who get into an apoplectic fit whenever anyone even brings up the subject of paedophiles, in the same way that ultra anti-gay preachers always end up at gay strip clubs. That sort of mindless anger makes me wary of people who behave the same way towards non-offending paedophiles. Maybe it's legitimate rage and it's nothing to be suspicious of, but mate, it looks like projection. Might want to check that shit and come off less frothing at the mouth.
If you have the desire to rape children, then yeah, that's bad. But most pedophiles, like most people, do not want child abuse.
Maybe, but your definition of child abuse and mine are not the same because for some reason, you think a child having sex with an adult isn't abuse.
Most pedophiles and people in NAMBLA absolutely condemn rape and child abuse.
And I'm sure they don't have a special definition that separates child rape and consenting sex with a child. But unfortunately for them, they are basically the same thing.
Whether you were biologically born with that sexual orientation or you were influenced by your surroundings.
Like, I don't know, getting shagged by a 30-year-old when you were 10. Not that I believe all victims of abuse will go on to abuse, obviously, but it is certainly a factor in many instances, vicious cycles and all that. This has just made me realise one huge problem that I have with this whole advocation of paedophilia nonsense is it encourages people not to seek out help with this stuff because, oh, it's natural. So is malaria. I'm still going to get my fucking shots if I go to Africa.
If you just have the desire to have a perfectly consensual sexual relationship with a child...
I'm not saying it again. You can repeat something 1,000 times, it doesn't suddenly become true at the 999 mark.
There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And pedophiles, like the LGBT community...
Oh, don't you fucking dare. Gay men and women are adults. There is not a single argument that you can make that isn't a false equivalent in this regard.
Seem to exist in very significant numbers in society. Why should we immediately discriminate against such a huge group of people, say that they are scum and they should be imprisoned when they have done absolutely nothing wrong?
If they've done nothing wrong and it's not known that they have this attraction, then yeah, we don't read minds and we don't punish for thought crimes. And certainly shouldn't be lynching or locking up if they have committed no crime. However, they should absolutely be encouraged to seek psychiatric help.
There are people who realize that they have a sexual attraction to children, but since society discriminates against pedophiles so much, these people contemplate suicide,
reinforcing that this is a mental health issue.
There are even stories in the US where adults apply electroshock therapy to boys as young as 12 who think that they have a sexual attraction to children. Like, what the fuck?
If you hadn't opened with an example of what appears to be quote-unquote healthy paedophilic relationships, therefore let old dudes bang kids, I would largely agree with some of this shit at least, but you didn't. And that was your fuck up. Yes, electroshocking children is wrong for similar reasons to having sex with them is wrong. And also, if a child is attracted to children, that's not the same thing as an adult being attracted to children. So whoever did this is just as ridiculous, if significantly more of a cunt, than you.
I do not want to live in a society where we condone this kind of discrimination and hostility towards a group of people who have done absolutely nothing wrong. This is vile. This is absolutely horrible.
And again, I'd completely agree, but you think that people having sex with children isn't inherently wrong. So are they included in that? That's the problem with faulty premises. They fuck up your good points too.
If a child and an adult have consensual sex, they both film it, and they both agree that it's fine for the footage to be on the internet.
You commit a crime and then film the crime, which in itself is a crime, and distribute it, another crime by the way. It's fine, because I don't understand what consent means.
There's absolutely nothing wrong done. Why should it be illegal?
Thought I might point out another thing that you don't seem to know anything about, probably because you haven't been through it yet. Puberty. You keep talking about 10-year-olds, and chances are they won't have started it yet. It's nature's way of saying, stop, what is wrong with you?
In the US, for producing child porn, an adult gets a minimum of 15 years in prison and a maximum of 30.
And what about the child? What did they get? Because this law is clearly about punishing happy couples and not, protecting kids, you fucking cretin.
That is fucking insane.
Yeah, you are.
Even worse is most countries criminalize simply possessing child pornography. Possessing child pornography, a completely non-violent act, whether you viewed it based on sexual attraction or non-sexual curiosity.
Nothing to do with discouraging people from making it or anything.
In the US, you get a minimum of 5 years in prison and a maximum of 15. What the fuck? And even if I gave you the benefit of the doubt and said that, okay, all child sex is rape, and so All child pornography is essentially footage of rape.
This is gonna be good, isn't it?
Is it wrong to upload or view footage of child rape?
Yes.
No!
Yes! Are you actually that stupid? Viewing, filming, sharing any rape is illegal and immoral. And yes, there are specific situations where that isn't necessarily the case, such as CCTV footage on the news in order to try and catch a perpetrator, etc. But even that would be heavily censored. We don't glorify victimization like that, because guess what? It'd encourage the few dickheads who would, if society didn't find it abhorrent, to go out and do it themselves.
Now, people might argue that the reason why footage of child porn or child rape should be banned is because having it on the internet would promote such behavior.
Yes, you've clearly heard the arguments. Now let's see why you don't understand them.
However, the fact is, there really is no evidence that there's a link between watching violent footage and an increase in violent crimes. And if there is, please show it to me.
Oh look, another false equivalence. You seem to use a lot of them. For starters, what makes you think that those statistics would even be comparable?
It's kind of like the people who say that having the death penalty helps reduce crime, or banning violent movies helps reduce violence. Like, it seems like there would be a logical connection, but the fact is, there's absolutely no evidence to show that there is a connection.
It's a moot point because those things can be justified in certain circumstances. Child rape cannot. They are not the same thing.
Uploading and watching footage of real violence should not be illegal. Similar to how you should not be sent to prison if you see footage of a reporter getting beheaded by a Muslim.
Some violence is perfectly legal, and a beheaded news reporter would literally be news.
It doesn't mean you want to conduct violence when you watch footage of real violence. It just means that you might have a curiosity at how horrible human beings can be.
Personally, I've only ever seen shit like that when I've been tricked into viewing it, when I immediately remove myself from those situations when I realise what's going on. Hey, maybe I'm a pussy, but I have absolutely no interest or curiosity in seeing real, monstrous human behaviour. Maybe that's something that's on you, mate.
Bottom line, producing and uploading footage of child porn should be absolutely fine and legal. If you want to upload and possess footage of child rape, that should be fine too. Punish the guy who actually raped the kid.
Punish whoever gave you your education too. They were clearly trying to run an experiment to make the world's dumbest argument machine.
Many people are willing to reduce the age of consent to whatever subjective opinion they have on how much brain development a child should have before they are capable of consenting to sex, whether that age be 12, 13, or 14.
I think I've just figured out why you dismiss brain development. It's because yours hasn't yet. It explains why you don't seem to understand some very basic precepts of our society, or the reasons why we protect children from predators.
Now, I would argue and ask, why do you think that kids and babies aren't able to consent to sex?
The same reason they can't consent to being thrown out of an aeroplane. And seriously? Babies? Babies?
The retardation is...
You know what? I'm not even going to finish that clip because this absolutely proves you have no concept of what consent could possibly be. There is no world in which anyone would think that goo goo gaga means stick your cock in me, you fucking moron.
Babies consent to sucking their thumb, to sleeping, to choosing the fire truck over the Hello Kitty during play.
Those are all choices that have been pre-selected for them. They also consent to play with electrical sockets or drinking a gallon of bleach, if that's your metric for consent. Guys, I think he might actually be retarded at this point.
They are perfectly able to show approval right when they're born.
Making choices and consenting to far more complicated ideas are not and never will be the same thing. If you think this is something even resembling a good argument, you might want to stop making videos, man. This shit is beyond moronic.
If a baby is curious about a man's genitals and he comes over and plays with it, that is a sexual act.
One that the baby has no concept of, and if the man doesn't suddenly go, what the fuck, and remove the child, then I just don't know what to say if you don't understand this basic shit.
But that is completely fine and harmless. Why should there be a problem with that?
It's not fine or harmless. Come on, Amos. Let's see your mountains of studies into the effects of sexual, and let's be really nice and just call them acts. I mean, it is abuse. It is abuse. But come on, show me your countless studies.
So I disagree that babies and kids aren't able to consent to sex. But even if I give it to you that, okay, all children below the age of 12 aren't able to consent to sex.
Oh, you'll give it to me, will you? That fucking fact? Well, thank you. I'm so grateful, you fucking pleb.
Does that mean that we should just reduce the age of consent to 12 and not eliminate age of consent laws entirely?
No.
No!
I feel there's going to be an idiotic caveat.
You see, and this is where the pretty nuanced thinking comes in, so brace your brains.
You don't know what consent means. I'll be bloody astounded if you can understand the concept of nuance.
There is a clear distinction between a person who is able to consent and the ability to be allowed to engage in consensual acts.
No, there isn't. Someone who can't consent can't engage in consensual acts. It is automatically non-consensual. Agreeing to something does not mean you consent. If you are incapable of understanding, like the way you can't consent to using words because you don't understand any of them apparently.
A child is not able to consent to sex below the age of 12, but say the impossibility happens and an 11-year-old consents to sex.
They didn't consent. They cannot consent because they are underage. How do you not understand any of this?
Is that fine? Absolutely.
Idiots.
Furthermore, if an adult has non-consensual sex with a 11-year-old child, eliminating age of consent laws would not let the adult get away because there are already rape laws.
I feel like I'm going crazy. How can someone understand so little and speak so much? I know I deal with a lot of stupids, but this is absurd.
So there is absolutely no logical connection that eliminating age of consent laws would increase sexual violence.
Citation needed, dumbass.
Because there will still be rape laws to protect children from abuse.
Having sex with children is abuse.
If you cite anecdotes of children who, at ages 9 or 10, had sex with an adult and then became traumatized their whole life, or predatory behavior where they were manipulated into a sexual act...
Oh, I like the dishonest use of anecdote to make it sound like it could be made up. We have plenty of proven cases of child molestation that went to court. Stop using Weasley language, you stupid little shit. And yes, I'm getting angry, but mostly at the idiocy of this entire 10-minute mess of a bunch of non-arguments with a faulty premise. This man is a moron.
Those are incidents of child abuse and child rape. It is absolutely different from a consensual, harmless relationship between a pedophile and a child.
Nope.
What age of consent laws for sex do is simply restrict...
You mean protect children?
...mutually beneficial sexual relationships...
Kids really benefit from being split in half by abusive adults.
...between a child and an adult. Lowering the age of consent laws is not enough. If you lower the age of consent law to 10 and then a 9-year-old comes along and says, I have had sex with an adult and I was perfectly fine with it, do you think that that adult should go to prison?
I think whoever brings in this 10-year-old age of consent law should be launched into the fucking sun. But yes, the adult should go to prison for breaking the fucking law.
No! It was perfectly harmless and both of them benefited. You think he should go to prison? That is insane.
No, you.
Look, I'm not a pedophile. I don't have a sexual attraction to children.
That may be, although you couldn't blame someone for thinking you did.
I do not possess child pornography. I do not even know how to find child pornography. What I am concerned about is society fucking over a group of people who have done absolutely nothing wrong and falsely accusing them of being child molesters and child rapists.
You have made a completely unconvincing and frankly stupid set of arguments based on the fact that you don't understand that saying yes isn't necessarily legal consent or even consent in general.
It's so obvious to me to not discriminate against a group of people who are absolutely harmless, similar to how we should not discriminate against gay, transgender, or black people.
That is not the same thing, you fucking moron.
But just because it concerns pedophiles, a far more discriminated community than the LGBT community in our current society, I just think that my stance on this issue is just very ahead of its time.
So was Jeffrey Dahmer's solution to population control.
But I guess only time will tell. Many of you after watching this video would probably still disagree with me, in which case leave a comment down below or even make an entire video response if you want to.
Well, I'll take that as consent, and that's okay because you're an adult, although you are retarded.
Maybe in a future video I'll respond to all your counter arguments. I hope we can all have a nice civil debate on whether or not we should discriminate against pedophiles without accusing anyone of being a child rapist or a child molester.
It's funny that you feel the need to add that.
Take care.
You too. Take care to make better arguments. I've seen some people making mention of your civil presentation in this video, and while that's true, it doesn't make your arguments any less absurd. Learn what consent is before making your rebuttals, for the love of God. This was a long video, and such a wrong one at that, so I'm going to order pizza and try and destroy a few brain cells with drink and shitty Netflix shows. See ya cunts later. Bye.